Welcome to another edition of Weekly Digest, a government information agency program that keeps you informed on what the administration has been doing that will create a better environment for citizens. I'm your host, Ursula Ramdale. Thank you for joining us. In this week's presentation for the period May 16 to 23, 2014, Guyana is on its way to being further blacklisted following the opposition's non-support of the AML bill. Focus has been placed on resuscitating drainage pumps which were decommissioned under the PNC regime. And Guyana is committed to finding a peaceful solution in the wake of Suriname's claim to New River Triangle. Guyana will have to make preparations for further blacklisting as the anti-money laundering bill has not been passed, even as the deadline for its passage is up.
Ghana stands to face estrangement from 190 countries for failing to pass the critically needed anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism bill, which incorporates the recommendation of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. Ghana is required to have this bill passed on or before May 26 or be declared non grata by the Financial Action Task Force to its member states as a country that is non-cooperative in the global fight against money laundering and the financing of terrorism. The local business sector is already feeling initial effects of not complying with several internationally recommended requirements, and actions such as money transfers and international banking procedures are increasingly becoming complicated.
The opposition seems unconcerned. In fact, they are doing everything, in my view, to prevent that from happening. All these amendments that they have proposed are in relation to the Principal Act. The Principal Act which they passed unanimously in the ninth Parliament. They sat and they passed all those provisions unanimously. Now they have some epiphany and they want now to change all these things, which are not recommendations of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. So it would appear at this point in time that it is unlikely that the bill will be passed. And what I presume or what I predict will transpire at the CFATF meeting on the 26th to the 29th of May is that simply a decision will be made to give effect to the decision which has already been made at the November plenary.
The CFATF meeting on May 26 to 29 is anticipated to give effect to the decision which has already been made at the November 2013 plenary, which is that Guyana shall be recommended to the Financial Action Task Force in Paris, France, for an international cooperation review group. Guyana has missed two deadlines to pass the CFATF cutoff date to pass this legislation, one on November 28, 2013 and the other on February 28, 2014. Ghana failed to meet the first time limit after the opposition, using their one-seat majority in the National Assembly to vote down the bill, led to the country being blacklisted at the regional level. Despite the formation of a select committee to examine proposals and counter-proposals from both the government and the opposition failed to attend many of the meetings, further stonewalling the process. The second failure was due to the opposition at the last moment proposing several amendments which are not related to the CFATF compliant bill, but to the Principal Act, which was passed unanimously in 2009.
Guyana is firm about jurisdiction of the New River Triangle, but is committed to finding a peaceful solution in wake of Suriname's claim.
The New River Triangle is part of Guyana's territory, and this has clearly been stated since 1936, when the Federative Republic of Brazil, the Dutch government at the time, and British Guyana decided where the tri-junction point will be. Recently, Suriname's Foreign Minister Winston Larkin restated his country's claim to the area.
What is attributed to my colleague from Suriname, then that is regrettable. But let me say that our two border commissions, the Surinamese Border Commission and Guyana's Border Commission on border matters between Guyana and Suriname, have been meeting, and those meetings are progressing very well, and we look forward to favorable outcomes in the not-so-distant future.
She pointed out, too, that what is necessary for all Guyanese citizens is to be aware of the history of the matter, to be aware of Guyana's borders, its size and shape.
We went to the Commission on the Law of the Sea to resolve our maritime border with Suriname. Our bilateral discussions with Suriname through the border commissions those discussions are aimed at resolving the matter consistent with international law. And this is the approach we will take.
Minister Rodrigues Burkett reiterated that Guyanese are a peace-loving people and the government has always adhered to the principle of resolving borders in a peaceful manner.
The Guyana government is currently on a drive to resuscitate several drainage pumps which were decommissioned during the PNC era as the need for better drainage and irrigation capacity continues to grow with the ever-changing weather patterns as a result of climate change.
Such pump station is the one recently commissioned at Rose Hall, Berbice, which had been out of order for more than 30 years. The Rose Hall pump station was commissioned on May 18 and will serve that and several other surrounding communities to alleviate the effects of flooding, whilst at the same time giving assistance to the farming community. According to Agriculture Minister Dr. Leslie Ramsamy, the government has recognized the need for the resuscitation of pumps given the current challenges that the country is facing as a result of climate change.
It was the period between 1975 and 1985 that many very important structures for drainage and irrigation were decommissioned for reasons that vary. There were pump stations that were closed down, and the onerous responsibility of the government in the last 2 decades have been to put these back at a time when we have to also put new stations in places where they never had pumps. There were sluices that were closed. There were canals that were closed. Indeed, over the last week, I've met several people who have come to me to solve a problem of transport and lease of land that were once canals that were sold. And at a time when our rainfall patterns have changed and our weather have changed, that now demands the use of these pumps and sluices, it has become a major task of the government to remedy the situation.
Secure drainage is an essential aspect of the agriculture sector, and in 2011, government spent more than $4.5 billion to strengthen drainage and irrigation structures countrywide, particularly in regions such as 2, 3, 5, and 6. This is essential to protect against the effects of climate change and to ensure that assets, productivity, and the livelihood of thousands of households and farmers that depend directly on agriculture for sustenance is maintained.
In this area, with the decommissioning of this pump station, 487 acres of land that were occupied by small farmers at the back of Rose Hall came to an end. And we have been trying to bring those back with the now commissioning of this pump station. It will be a good time to ensure that we complete that work. As we speak, other pump stations on the Quarantine Coast are being put in place.
With these much-needed infrastructural projects in place, the minister called on residents to play their role in alleviating the effects of flooding, along with poor drainage and irrigation.
The 10th Berbice Exposition and Trade Fair promises more exciting activities this year. The event was officially launched on May 21 under the theme Exploiting Science and Technology for Economic Development.
The Central Quarantine Chamber of Commerce, in collaboration with the Ministry of Tourism, launched a 4-day event, which is scheduled for July 25 to 28 at the Albion Sports Complex, Berbice. The family-oriented event has, over the years, been a successful platform for bringing together businesses, entrepreneurs, consumers, potential investors, and visitors to one marketplace, showcasing talents and products and services.
The Berbice Expo, as a trade and consumer show, is a reflection of the strength of entrepreneurship in Berbice and Guyana, and mirrors the progress made by our large as well as our micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, which forms the backbone of our economy. The Ministry and the GTA would like to congratulate the Central Quarantine Chambers of Commerce for their leadership, proactivity, and vision in nurturing and encouraging entrepreneurship in Berbice, and for organizing and staging this successful, growing, and much anticipated expo. We are hoping that this, the 10th year, it can also be a profitable one.
Region 6 is mostly agricultural driven, and this year the aim is to highlight the use of science and technology in the sector. This move complements the government's commitment to information communication technology for economic development.
After Berbice Expo 2014, we should see some more agro-processing farms being set up in Berbice. So we don't have the nature of spoilage that we have. A lot of cash crops and fruits are being dumped every year, things that we can preserve and store, and we can even export.
With the new floodlights currently being installed at the Albion Sports Complex, persons will have a much safer environment to socialize and showcase their products. There will be activities such as concerts, stand-up comedies, pageants, and fireworks, among other activities. Some of the large manufacturing companies from Georgetown will be participating in the exhibition. Talks are ongoing with the Suriname Chambers of Commerce to have some of their products showcased. Small manufacturers and processors of the region will also be given special incentives to be part of the expo.
Stay tuned. More of the Weekly Digest after the break.
The opposition's disapproval of monies for the Office of the President has affected several agencies such as the Civil Defense Commission. This agency deals with managing and assisting persons and communities affected by disasters, natural and man-made. The move to disapprove funding for the CDC means that if any disaster were to occur, the government would not be able to provide any assistance to those in need.
By cutting the administrative arm of the Office of the President's funding, the allocation for the provision of the Head of State Security has been removed. This action can compromise the security of President Donald Ramotar. This move sets a dangerous precedent and is unacceptable for any head of state, government, or right-thinking people of a democratic nation. The disapproval of funds by the political opposition for the Ministry of Finance's administrative arm means that students wishing to attend the University of Guyana will not be able to access any loans for 2014. The move will prevent many students who are unable to pay cash from studying and having a tertiary education. Most of these students are underprivileged and are unable to afford higher education to further their development and increase job opportunities.
Government's efforts to continue the improvement of medical services have been negatively affected by the decision of the parliamentary opposition to cut funding for the specialty hospital and the medical sector. This move means that monies for the provision of medical gear for doctors and nurses, along with new equipment for hospitals and clinics such as those at Fort Kaituma, Linden, Kokwani, and Bartica, and new ambulances have not been approved. This move by the political opposition will adversely affect the provision and delivery of health care in communities across Guyana.
Foreign Affairs Minister Caroline Rodriguez-Burkett has assumed the chairmanship of the Council for Foreign and Community Relations, which recently concluded its 17th meeting in Guyana.
Guyana took over from Trinidad and Tobago, whose Foreign Minister Winston Ducaran led the council for the past year. This forum allows for ministers of foreign affairs to look back and take stock of the multiple activities undertaken by the community in the promotion and protection of its interests.
This review and analytical exercise take on particular importance this year, as the final touches are being put to the 5-year strategic plan for the Caribbean community, which will be presented to the heads of government at their conference in July. That plan will lay out the community's priorities over the period as we seek to focus on a few practical and achievable goals. The emphasis on prioritization applies to all councils, including the COFCO, as it seeks to position the community advantageously in the international community.
CARICOM has undertaken an introspection of how it can strengthen the systems and processes of the integration movement, and COFCOR will be playing a key role in the overall process.
At the level of the COFCOR, we have had to be aware and ready to respond to changes on the international scene that would consequently require repositioning, I should say, of our policies. This has therefore been a central theme in several of our meetings. Today, Guyana is the venue where our focus will be on the conduct of the region's foreign policy in a changing global environment. I am indeed looking forward to our own introspection, at the end of which I hope we will arrive at clear and practical actions that would reflect our adaptation in a rapidly changing world.
COFCOR's outgoing chairman emphasized the need for a new form of diplomacy.
Two things seem to have emerged based on the dialogue and reflection over the last year. One is the clear gap in connectivity. The Caribbean region is connected with the world, but it is still to be connected with itself. And that, to me, is a major challenge that we must embark upon, as we have started to do. And secondly, we have seen the world global architecture changing and the different convergence process taking place in many parts of the world. We too, as the Secretary General, have indicated, been in touch with several different places in which there are new convergence processes. And in that context, we in the region must not be left behind, not creating a new convergence process consistent with the global convergence processes taking place in the world. And it is in this context, therefore, that we are meeting here today, Madam Chairperson, with a great agenda ahead of you, with an agenda that has moved from the fact that the sun is shifting to the building of the pillars for a new Caribbean community. A new diplomacy, therefore, is what is required, and we must start first and foremost in that diplomacy within our region.
CARICOM has not only sought to strengthen its relations with traditional partners, but has also pursued the formation of new alliances. These include Brazil, Ecuador, New Zealand, and Spain, whose foreign ministers were represented at this meeting.
Finance Minister Dr. Ashney Singh has called for equal responsibility to be allocated to contractors as well as supervisors for work done on the government contracts. The call was made at a consultants' workshop under the theme Procurement and Management of Professional Services. Finance Minister Dr. Ashney Singh challenged officials of the Basic Needs Trust Fund and the Caribbean Development Bank to develop a mechanism to hold persons accountable for executing contracts which would redound to the benefit of society as a whole.
How do we better hold those contracted to prepare designs for us accountable for the quality of those designs? And to ensure that were those designs subsequently to be found to be inadequate or deficient in one way or another, what instruments do we hold to secure accountability from those contractors?
He insisted on equal responsibility for contractors, consulting and supervising firms which participate in executing and supervising the work stipulated under the contract.
I want equally a mechanism to be able to hold supervising firms. Because if you tell me that this contractor delivered this work in accordance with this bill of quantities and in accordance with this engineering design and in accordance with these specs, and I subsequently find that that was not the case, I don't want only to hold the contractor accountable. It is not the contractor who certified that I can pay him. It is the supervising consultant who certified and said, valuation number 4, $15 million worth of work completed. Bill of quantities certified. Proceed to pay, sir.
The minister also noted that while variation may be necessary as designs are adapted, contractors who are bidding for contracts are expected to be aware of this. He reiterated the call for a way to be found to hold persons accountable for contracts that are not carried out in the manner stipulated in agreements made. As Guyana celebrates 48 years as an independent nation, the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport continues to stage events to ensure citizens are aware of the country's rich history. The latest activity is an independence exhibition.
The exhibition, which has now become an official part of the country's independence celebrations, seeks to inform the public, primarily youths, about the struggles faced by their ancestors and enlighten them on their country's history.
For the last 5 years or so, we've been holding this exhibition especially for the children of our country, because we recognize that independence perhaps happened so many years ago that the younger persons in our society might not understand the context, what happened before, what happened during, and eventually how we got independence. And so we use the opportunity every year around this time to hold an annual exhibition where we are able to bring alive that story of our independence, the struggle for our independence. And we are very pleased that every year schools would participate and come out to these exhibitions. And we hope that this year it would not be different. And we'll get many more schools coming out here.
The exhibition saw a wide display of posters depicting Guyanese historians and their political backgrounds, clippings from old newspapers, sections on former presidents, models of the kanji pheasant, the national bird, and medals, along with national symbols and books, along with many other treasured gems of the country. Students from various schools in Georgetown were given tours of the exhibition during the formal opening ceremony, which was held on May 22. This will continue throughout the period for the independence celebrations. The exhibition is open to the general public until June 6, 2014.
Stay tuned. More of the Weekly Digest after the break.
Government's efforts to continue the improvement of medical services have been negatively affected by the decision of the parliamentary opposition to cut funding for the specialty hospital and the medical sector. This move means that monies for the provision of medical gear for doctors and nurses, along with new equipment for hospitals and clinics such as those at Port Kaituma, Linden, Kokwani and Bartica, and new ambulances have not been approved. This move by the political opposition will adversely affect the provision and delivery of health care in communities across Guyana. The opposition's disapproval of monies for the Office of the President has affected several agencies such as the Civil Defense Commission. This agency deals with managing and assisting persons and communities affected by disasters, natural and man-made. The move to disapprove funding for the CDC means that if any disaster were to occur, the government would not be able to provide any assistance to those in need.
The disapproval of funds by the political opposition for the Ministry of Finance's administrative arm means that students wishing to attend the University of Guyana will not be able to access any loans for 2014. The move will prevent many students who are unable to pay cash from studying and having a tertiary education. Most of these students are underprivileged and are unable to afford higher education to further their development and increase job opportunities. By cutting the administrative arm of the Office of the President's funding, the allocation for the provision of the Head of State Security has been removed. This action can compromise the security of President Donald Ramutar. This move sets a dangerous precedent and is unacceptable for any head of state, government, or right-thinking people of a democratic nation.
During Cabinet's statutory meeting at the Office of the President on May 20th, several issues of national concern were discussed. The media was subsequently briefed on Cabinet's deliberations.
At its May 20th statutory meeting, Cabinet gave its no objections to 8 contracts in the health, housing and water, sport and natural resources sector. The government has resolved to use the full force of the law to ensure that normalcy is restored at the Georgetown Mayor and City Council.
Cabinet specifically was interested in the actions being taken by the mayor and his acolytes that expose them to contempt citations with specific regards to the rulings of the Chief Justice on their matter.
The threat of international blacklisting is now more imminent than ever as a result of the opposition's failure to support the amendments to the Anti-Money Laundering and Countering the Financing of Terrorism Bill.
The drop-dead date is upon us. A CFATF compliant bill has not been enacted by Guyana, and that is a truly sad state of affairs. The efforts that have been made by so many to get the bill or to get enacted, those efforts must be acknowledged. And sadly, one has to concede that those efforts have really gone for naught.
The government maintains that the AML-CFT legislation is a more political rather than a legal issue for the opposition, who is holding on to their majority in the House to obtain their political ends. Meanwhile, the government has agreed to withdraw its disapproval of the USAID LEAD project to allow for further negotiations.
With the government's withdrawal of its disapproval of the project in its entirety, indeed sees, and I think Cabinet has affirmed, a U.S. lead project being mutually agreed between the government of Guyana and USAID, saying that presupposes a conclusion of this engagement, a conclusion that would allow USAID intentions to have a project and the government of Guyana and its support where USAID concerned to have such a project in Guyana.
And with those features, we have come to the end of this edition of Weekly Digest. But before we go, here's a recap of the highlights. Guyana is on its way to being further blacklisted following the opposition's non-support of the AML bill. Focus has been placed on resuscitating drainage pumps which were decommissioned under the PNC regime. And Guyana is committed to finding a peaceful solution in the wake of Suriname's claim to the New River Triangle. Please note that Weekly Digest and other government information can be found on our website www.gina.gov.gy, or you can send us your comments and suggestions at ginagov@gmail.com. Join us again next week as we highlight more of government's programs and policies which are enhancing the lives of Guyanese. I'm Ursula Ramdale. Do have a safe week ahead. Goodbye.